A woman who portrayed kings in a time when women weren't even taken seriously as artists. Who was this fascinating painter, highly regarded then, but almost forgotten today? Welcome to Stories of Austria, the history channel dedicated to Austria's historical figures. I'm Kathi, a city guide in Vienna, and I learned at the Fine Arts Museum that some of the paintings of the Spanish Habsburgs were created by a woman. I became curious about the life of this painter who, as a woman during the Renaissance, managed to assert herself in a male-dominated field. How did she achieve this? Today, we delve into the life of Sofonisba Anguissola, one of the first internationally acclaimed female artists in history. Born in 16th century Italy, admired for her talent even by Michelangelo and Van Dyck, she became court painter to King Philip II of Spain. But her path was anything but easy. How did she manage to achieve fame and recognition? And why is her name less well known today than those of her male colleagues? That's exactly what we'll explore today. The Anguissola family was a respected merchant family from Piacenza. According to tradition, they were descendants of Suar di Galvano, who played a key role in the liberation of Constantinople from the siege of the Umayyad Caliphate in 717. Legend has it that after returning from the battle, Galvano appeared before Emperor Leo IV Isaurian and showed him his shield, bearing the serpent emblem. He said to have exclaimed, "Anguissola fecit victoriam." The serpent alone brought victory. To reward Galvano for his achievement, Leo IV bestowed upon him the new family name Anguissola. The family emblem appears repeatedly in Sofonisba's self-portraits as she constantly strove to solidify her social status in order to be accepted in scholarly circles. She thereby emphasizes that she possessed the qualities and strengths that characterized a virtuous noblewoman. Sofonisba was the eldest of 7 children, 6 daughters and 1 son, of Amilcare Anguissola and his second wife Bianca Ponzoni. She was born around 1531-1532 in Cremona. The family members had all names of antiquity, great figures such as Hannibal, the field commander of Carthage, or of Greek and Roman mythology. Sofonisba, for example, was niece of the famous Hannibal, and she was praised for her beauty and her dedication to supporting her family. Amilcare and Bianca Anguissola wanted her daughters to be educated in a humanistic way. They should study painting under Bernardino Campi. However, painting was a privileged pursuit for them. They never received official commissions to earn a living, but rather privileges, jewels, fine fabrics and other gifts befitting their status as virtuous noblewomen in exchange for their paintings. Amilcare acted as his daughter's agent, guiding their activities as painters. And this proved to be an excellent investment, one that, particularly in Sofonisba's case, would bring benefits and prestige to the entire family. Amilcare's approach was based on the new ideas and teachings of Castiglione's treatise, De Courtier, and was inspired by humanist culture. Sofonisba's father thus fully embraced the contemporary trend of cultural renewal in the education of his daughters. In response to Castiglione's text, a new ideal of female behavior developed, the ideal courtly lady. To quote the text of the ideal lady, "I wish that this lady possesses knowledge of literature, music and painting, and can dance and enjoy herself. And so she will be very graceful in her conversations, her laughter, her games, her jokes, in short, in everything." In Castiglione's view, women were expected to have a cultural education comparable to that of their male peers. Otherwise, they faced social exclusion. Girls were no longer expected to simply obey and devote themselves to housework. They needed a cultural foundation that would enable them to converse and navigate social interactions. Amilcare devoted himself to his daughter's education, ensuring that they studied not only literature and music, subjects already mastered by women, but also painting as a long-term investment. The Italian architect and painter Giorgio Vasari, who was in Cremona in 1566, wrote about the daughters. These four noble and virtuous sisters were so enthusiastic about all the fine arts, and especially about art, that the house of Signor Amilcare Anguissola, the father of a distinguished family, seemed to me like a stronghold of painting, indeed of all the arts. I must report that this year in her father's house in Cremona, I saw a painting executed with great care by her, portraits of the three sisters playing chess and an old woman of the house. All are executed with such care and zeal that they give the appearance of life and lack nothing except language. This painting, the chess game, is considered the first depiction of an everyday scene in Italian painting. It probably hung in the main room of the Anguissola family home and was thus clearly visible to visitors. It is an early example of one of Sofonisba's favorite portrait subjects, family members. Three of her sisters, Lucia, Minerva and Europa, are playing chess in an intimate, familiar atmosphere. The scene unfolds under the watchful eye of a servant, probably Cornelia Appiani, who is observing the young girl's game. Appiani would later accompany Sofonisba to Spain. In the reception room of the Anguissola house hung Sofonisba's family portrait. Vasari lingered during his visit to the Anguissola house to admire this work. In another picture, portrayed by the same Sofonisba, one sees her father, Signor Amilcare, at his side one of his daughters, her sister Minerva, who distinguished herself in painting and literature, and beside him Asdrubale, her brother, the son of the same man. These figures, too, are so masterfully executed that they appear lively and lifelike. Sofonisba began studying at the age of 11 with Bernardino Campi until he moved to Milan in 1549. The new teacher then was Bernardino Gatti, named Il Soiaro. And it was extraordinary that women were only allowed to study painting within their own families, not outside their families. Thus makes Sofonisba the first known female painter who was permitted to apprentice outside her family circle. That sounds impressive, but wait, it gets even better. Her talent was truly exceptional, and this is demonstrated by the fact that her father took over the management of his gifted daughter and corresponded with outstanding artists of the time in order to secure commissions for her. Amilcare even sent Michelangelo a drawing of his daughter, depicting a laughing girl. When she was 15 years old, she was mentioned by the Bishop of Alba as one of the most talented painters who ever lived. Sofonisba's fame as a painter must indeed have been widespread. Annibale Caro sought a portrait of her and declared in a letter to Amilcare, "I desire nothing more than her own image, so that I may show two wonders at once, the painting and the master." If you find that fact amazing too, show it with a like of the video. And then something happened that changed her life. Sofonisba was about 25 years old when, in 1559, she was appointed on the recommendation of the Duke of Alba, Fernando de Toledo. She was invited to the Spanish court in Madrid to become a lady-in-waiting to Elizabeth of Valois, the future queen. The journey from Italy to Spain marked her transition from the guardianship of her father to King Philip II, who assumed her dowry and paid her a salary as his wife's lady-in-waiting. In the autumn of 1559, Sofonisba departed with 2 relatives, 2 ladies and 6 female servants. One of them must have been Cornelia Appiani, the one who appears in Sofonisba's painting The Chess Game. She brought trunks with her, containing her most precious clothes and letters of recommendation, which served as permits for passage through the various ports and checkpoints that then lay along the route from Italy to Spain. Finally, they reached Guadalajara in Spain, where the future queen was now expected, the then 14-year-old Elizabeth of Valois. Her 16 ladies-in-waiting were made up of two groups: the entourage from France, which had been personally selected by Elizabeth's mother, and the women who were already in Spain. From spring 1561, the court resided in the Alcazar Palace in Madrid, which had become the new capital at the behest of Philip II. And what did it actually mean to belong to the Queen's court? The Casa de la Reina, to which all female employees in the Queen's service belonged, was a long-established institution. As a lady-in-waiting to the Queen, a woman held a paid position and enjoyed the privileges that this role conferred through the honor of serving the Queen. Sofonisba's arrival at court placed her in royal environment and thus offered the entire Anguissola family a unique opportunity to gain access to the king's system of privileges, favors and patronages, and to build a network of social and political patronage through which they could enhance their own status. The ladies-in-waiting were housed on the second floor of the Alcazar, above the Piano Nobile, where the royal apartments were located. The rooms of the ladies-in-waiting were assigned according to the rank and the age of the women. Sofonisba enjoyed what today might be called full board. Ladies-in-waiting lived and ate in the palace according to a rather strict set of rules. They had the privilege of sharing the personal and private sphere of the female members of the royal family, but their duties kept them in regulated spaces and required them to avoid any contact with the outside world as much as possible. Sofonisba received a regular salary, which she also used to pay her maid for the laundry, for example. However, the payments were not always punctual. Delays can be traced using documents in the Milanese state archives, which show how Sofonisba demanded earlier payments in 1563. Sofonisba now served not only as a lady-in-waiting, but also as Queen Elizabeth's painting teacher. An interesting letter from the Bishop of Limoges to Catherine de' Medici describes the young queen's early passion for painting. In her chambers, Elizabeth made a sketch with a pencil and the bishop remarked, "It is incredible that she, who only recently began to paint, has already made such great progress thanks to the lesson of her Italian lady-in-waiting, which the king made possible for her." The first portrait of Sofonisba depicting the young queen was so successful that the king, Philip II, himself commissioned one. The queen wished that she paint her portrait from life, and she did so with such admirable perfection that the queen was extremely pleased, and so was the king, as it seemed almost supernatural. We know that Sofonisba painted many portraits of the members of the royal family, but due to a fire, almost none of them exist till today. Just copies of them by other artists, such as Peter Paul Rubens, for example. Another famous painting of Sofonisba, and now lost, was commissioned by Prince Don Carlos. It is interesting because Sofonisba tried to correct the prince's physical deformities, and Don Carlos greatly admired Sofonisba's portrait, and he commissioned even more. If you want to find out more of the tragic life of Don Carlos, check it out on my YouTube channel. I made a lot of videos about historical figures on my main channel, the German YouTube channel, but I try to do more and more here on the English channel as well. So if you're fine with subtitles, you can now check on the Don Carlos video on the German channel. But only 9 years after Sofonisba's arrival at the Spanish court, her life was about to change dramatically. The year 1568 was marked by two deaths that deeply affected Sofonisba: Prince Don Carlos and, a few months later, her mistress, Elizabeth of Valois. She died giving birth to the third child, and the child died as well. This plunged the entire court into deep mourning. And Sofonisba, who had been very emotionally attached to the queen, fell into a depression and asked to be dismissed. A letter even states, Miss Sofonisba declares she no longer wants to live. After the death of Elizabeth of Valois, the Queen's court was dissolved and its staff reassigned. Just a month after her death, Philip II began sending the women to their families, to weddings, or to convents. He paid the dowries of those who married or entered convents. The Queen's court changed to the court of the Infantas. Only those who had gained the favor of the king or later attracted the attention of the new queen, Anne of Austria, remained at the court and were assigned to the Infantas. And ladies who could not return to the families also remained at the court. And Sofonisba was one of them. But her position at court during this period is unclear. Although there are indications that she belonged to the Infantas household and served Elizabeth's daughter, Isabella Clara Eugenia, in particular, she does not appear in the list of ladies-in-waiting. It appears that Sofonisba served the Infantas while awaiting Philip's decision to arrange marriages befitting their station. But a document from the king's secretary testifies that Sofonisba viewed these plans as an attempt at expulsion from the palace. Apparently, Sofonisba wanted to remain at court and was deeply disappointed that she was being denied service to the new queen. However, Philip believed that Sofonisba had stayed at court for too long and that it was therefore time for her to leave. But then his new wife stood in his way. In the year 1570, Philip II married his niece, Anne of Austria, and she seemed to get along well with Sofonisba. Anne interceded with Philip on Sofonisba's behalf when the latter, along with some other women, rebelled. Together, the women used iron bars to break the padlocks that had been placed on the windows on the king's orders, presumably to prevent the young woman from looking out and making contact with young suitors. The king's secretary had a detailed account of the incident. Last night, some insolent women tore out the door bolts and broke the window locks. Then they threw the locks to the ground and threatened to smash the heads of those who had allowed their windows to be closed in this way. The king was furious and ordered the young women to be sent back to their families without their dowries and without the customary promise of marriage that formed the basis of their privileged position at court. Sofonisba was to be punished along with other women. Philip II ordered them locked in their chambers. The queen, however, intervened and released the women after half a day. This story surprised me. If you also love stories like this, subscribe to the channel now. There are always new exciting stories here to find. But what would become of Sofonisba's life? In 1570, she was about 38 years old, quite old for marriage. And according to the documents that had survived, Philip II had long tried in vain to find a husband for her. Finally, in 1572, Fabrizio Moncada Pignatelli Carafa was chosen. He was the second son of a Sicilian prince and about the same age as Sofonisba. Sofonisba departed to Sicily but always remained in close contact with the Infantas throughout her life. She had received a dowry of the court of over 20,000 ducats, but her husband took out loans to maintain his lifestyle. To settle his debts, Fabrizio pawned Sofonisba's assets, including a gold ring with a square diamond. Perhaps this ring was the one Sofonisba had received from Don Carlos as thanks for the portrait that had lessened his deformities. She would never get the ring back. And once again, fate struck, ending Sofonisba's marriage after only 5 years. On April 25, 1578, her husband boarded a ship to sail to the Spanish court, but he never reached Spain as he drowned after a pirate attack. Sofonisba was now alone and in financial straits. She needed support to reclaim her dowry and other property from her deceased husband's family. Although Philip II offered her the chance to return to Spain, she chose to go back to her native Italy and ask her brother Asdrubale for help. And the next section is my personal highlight. One of the reasons I dedicated a video to this amazing woman is that she never gave up and always strived for her personal fulfillment within her means. Now, almost 50 years old, Sofonisba fell in love and married without direct permission. Because a year after Fabrizio's death, Sofonisba and her brother boarded the ship Patrona, which was to take them from Palermo to Genoa. There, they planned to disembark and continue their journey to Cremona, but the ship's captain was the Genoese Orazio Lomellini. Although 15 years younger and of lower social standing, but from a respected Genoese family, the two fell in love. She married him and moved with her husband to his birthplace, Genoa, where his family enjoyed high social standing. This move marked a new chapter in her life. With a capable, much younger captain as her new partner, a new home, a new family in a city where she created more paintings. She again got in touch with the Spanish royal family, and in 1583, Sofonisba received compensation for the hardships caused by Fabrizio's death and was granted an annual rent, which ensured the couple a dignified life befitting their station. After 35 years in Genoa, the couple returned to Palermo in 1615 due to Orazio's business obligations. Despite her advanced age, Sofonisba accompanied her husband. Around this time, she gave up painting due to her failing eyesight. But in 1624, the young Flemish painter Antonis van Dyck visited her, and on one page of his Italian sketchbook, he captured Sofonisba in a drawing and added some notes praising her steady hand and thanking her for her advice on painting. Sofonisba died childless on November 16 in 1625 and was buried in Palermo. Her husband dedicated the following marble tombstone to her: to his wife Sofonisba of the noble Anguissola family, who due to her beauty and extraordinary talents was among the most famous women in the world, and so outstanding in the depiction of human figures that no one of her time could equal her. Orazio Lomellini, filled with deep sorrow, erected this last honor, small for such a woman, but the greatest for the mortals, 1632. The story of Sofonisba Anguissola shows us that talent knows no bounds, even in a time of restrictions. Her work have found their way into many art collections, such as those of the Vatican and the Fine Arts Museum in Vienna. Yet she is rarely given the spotlight. Were you familiar with her before this video? If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel for more exciting stories in Austrian dialect. And let me know in the comments, which historical figure should I feature next? Thanks for watching!